𝗽𝗵cie𝘁់, daughter of the chief of the 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁់tribe, was photographed around 1905. In the image, she appears in 𝗽𝗵cie ceremonial clothing, with a belt and bead necklaces. The 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁് village is located in the semi-arid central west region of New Mexico near Albuquerque, capturing a moment of pride and cultural affirmation for her people. In 1908, photographer Roland Reed captured a woman from the Ojibwe tribe. At first glance, it's just a posed portrait, but this photo works like a window into the past, revealing traces of daily life and the dignity of this people at a moment in their history. Far from movie cliches, it shows the real presence of indigenous women during that period. Around 1900, Carl Wernz photographed two girls from the Hopi tribe leaning against a window in Arizona. At first, it looks like any ordinary domestic scene, but the framing highlights the curious look of the two, stuck inside the house while watching, in attentive silence, the world happening outside. The image freezes a moment of discovery. This 1878 photograph shows a woman from the Cheyenne Nation at Fort Keogh, in the lands of Montana. She poses calmly, but carries in her features and clothing the history of a people pushed to the margins. Far from the epic settings of the Wild West, it's indigenous life appearing in front of the camera. The image suggests strength amid the occupation of the territory. In the early 1900s, photographer Poli captured three women from Isleta Pueblo, Carlota Chiwiwi and her daughters, Maria and Felicita Tura. They appear to be posing for a formal portrait, but the image opens a small window into the community's daily life and the family bonds that support that moment. There, they are protagonists of their own story. In this photo, a group of Hopi girls poses in 𝗽𝗵cie on First Mesa in Arizona. The picture, taken by Frederick Monson around 1900, shows the young girls wearing their traditional clothing, which visually tells the story and identity of the Hopi people at that time. Far from Old West cliches, they reveal an active and present indigenous life. Here we see a girl from Taos Pueblo in New Mexico, photographed in 1895. The framing captures an ordinary moment in her daily routine, but it carries the mark of a community with a long and unique history. Every detail around her reinforces the continuity of Pueblo traditions at the end of the century, far from movie stereotypes. The image shows a young woman from the Kiowa Nation, photographed in 1892. She stands at the center of the scene, and her posture, clothes, and expression reveal traces of daily life in her community. More than an individual portrait, the photo suggests social norms, belonging, and ways of being Kiowa in that living historical moment. This 1897 photograph shows a woman from the Spokane tribe taken by Frank LaRoche. The framing brings her face and clothing closer, creating a kind of window into her community's world. By observing her, we see not only the person, but also echoes of Spokane history and culture, which rarely appear in school books. In this image, the so-called corn spirit takes shape in a woman from the Pueblo community, possibly in New Mexico, photographed in 1904. The portrait highlights the central role of corn in beliefs and rituals, connecting food, spirituality, and collective survival in a single symbol, very different from the simplified narratives about indigenous peoples. In 1900, photographer Carl Everton Moon traveled through indigenous territories to capture the daily life of native peoples. He wanted to preserve faces, clothing, and rituals in their original form, before white expansion changed those peoples forever, along with their customs and deeper ancestral memories. This photo from the 1880s shows a woman from the Taos Pueblo tribe in her own environment. It's not a studio pose. The framing reveals details of her clothing, hair, and the way she looks at the camera. Every feature helps us understand her role, her routine, and the bonds that tie her to that village and to her people's culture. In the 1880s, Marcia Pascal appears, daughter of George Paschal, an officer in the United States Army, and from a lineage in which half of her heritage was Cherokee. Her path crosses a time of political and cultural changes, when indigenous identities were tested and closely watched. In 1894, this Kiowa woman appears in the scene representing a people with a complex history. While she poses, the world around her is changing fast. Laws, borders, and customs imposed by colonizers clash with the Kiowa worldview, pressuring traditions that try to resist quietly and keep their dignity. Around 1900, the camera captures a young Native American woman in traditional clothing. Her posture, adornments, and the setting tell more than just a beautiful portrait. They reveal how she understands herself within her own culture and show a piece of U.S. history that barely appears in movies. Captured in 1899 by photographer Frank Reinhardt, this photo shows 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁់, an Apache woman, in a rare moment of pause in front of the camera. The portrait crosses time and puts us face to face with her identity, reminding us how images like this are some of the few windows left to see that passed. When we hear the name 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁់we step into the history of the Chiricahua, one of the Apache groups. Behind that name is a life shaped by the land, by family, and by conflicts with colonizers that put this people to the test and demanded constant adaptation in order to keep existing. In 1886, Lizzie Longwolf appears as a performer in Buffalo Bill's show, part of an Old West turned into a traveling spectacle. On stage, her indigenous presence was displayed as an attraction, while off stage, the same society that applauded her kept laws and customs that threatened her people every day. A photograph from 1895 shows a young woman from the 𝗽𝗵cie tribe standing in front of the camera in her traditional clothing. In the details of her hairstyle, her fabric, and the way she occupies the frame, we see a piece of 𝗽𝗵cie culture, a daily life far from the stereotyped images of movies, TV, and history books. In 1899, photographer Frank Reinhardt captures 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁, presented as a member of the Chiricahua Apache. The portrait lets us observe every feature, her posture before the lens, and the pieces of her clothing. These details hold signs of a culture that persisted, even while being framed by the photographer's gaze. Captured in 1886, this photo shows 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁់, a Chiricahua Apache prisoner of war. She appears in the midst of captivity, a symbol of the conflicts between indigenous peoples and colonizing forces that turned their lands into places of control, loss, and daily resistance to imposed domination. Around 1900, this photograph presents Alice, a young indigenous woman whose exact origin is uncertain, possibly linked to the Cayuse, Walla Walla, or Umatilla tribes. Her features, clothing, and the setting around her work as quiet clues about her culture, her history, and the shaping of her identity. Dated 1885, this image shows a young woman of the 𝗵𝗵cie tribe in a moment of calm observation. Her face, the way she presents herself, and the elements around her reveal signs of her people's daily life, suggesting practices, values, and ways of living that rarely appear in official or school accounts. In 1900, this photograph captures a young 𝗽𝗵cie woman on her wedding day. She appears wrapped in richly crafted traditional clothing, marking the symbolic weight of the ritual. Every detail of her outfit and the scene points to the role of family, community, and spirituality in this decisive moment in her life. Also from 1886, this photograph features Julie Nelson, someone anonymous to us today but fully rooted in her own time. The way she dresses and positions herself before the camera reveals the social and emotional expectations of the era, letting us imagine her conflicts, desires, and quiet inner thoughts in that moment. Painted in 1895 by George A. Addison, the piece 𝗽𝗵cie𝘁 shows two young women in a calm setting on Kiowa Island. The detailed brushwork reveals gestures, clothing, and landscape with realism, bringing these figures closer to everyday life and undoing the distance created by idealized images of the past. In the 1880s, a group of young 𝗵𝗵cie women gained visibility within their own tribe. They took care of daily life, took part in hunting and trading, prepared food and rituals, and kept the memory of their ancestors alive, going against the passive image the Old West in movies usually shows.